After the attack by the Palestinian terrorist organization Hamas on the Jewish state, I repeatedly visited the affected sites and reported on what I witnessed. I saw the places of horror and observed the changes within Israeli society. I was present when rockets were fired at Israel, and I watched as Israeli troops responded to the pogrom by entering the Gaza Strip. I believe that people must not forget what has happened and continues to happen here. Hamas shows no humanity. They behave in ways reminiscent of the Islamic State. Now, in March 2024, I am back on the ground, and in this report I will provide an overview of the current situation. Shortly after the pogrom of October 7th, the mood in Israel was at an all-time low. People were frightened, the streets were empty, and even the stores, restaurants, and bars were closed. When I boarded the plane this time, the mood was different. The people on the plane seemed calmer. However, when I entered the terminal in Tel Aviv, I realized that this calmness might just be a survival strategy. My first sight was a long wall covered with pictures of the hostages that Hamas has taken and is still hiding in Gaza today. Hostages that are now surrounded by murderers and rapists. Alarmingly, it is not even known how many of the hostages are still alive. My first thought was that Israel is trapped in a kind of time warp. Moreover, the country has not even had the opportunity to mourn the approximately 1,200 people who were brutally murdered due to the ongoing hostage situation.
My
first stop was the Mediterranean city of Tel Aviv. I first went to the square that serves as the central place where the Israeli population reminds the world of the hostages' plight. The square is dotted with art installations. People are trying to exert pressure on their government and society so that they don't forget the fate of those who were torn from their lives and whose fate remains unknown. However, when I visited Israel last year, this location had been a place of profound dismay. Now in March, roughly 6 months after the attack, it seems that people have become accustomed to seeing the faces of the kidnapped. People walk by the posters without even looking up, engrossed in their smartphones. Some of the posters are faded and they don't seem to be replaced. Tel Aviv seems to be caught in a trauma on the one hand, while on the other, this cosmopolitan metropolis is trying with all its might to return to life.
Mit aller Kraft ins Leben zurückzufinden in Tel Aviv. Und das ist eine große Veränderung.
The beaches are packed again with people enjoying leisure activities, such as surfing or playing volleyball. A stark contrast from last year. The restaurants, bars and stores have also reopened, and people are trying to find a balance between returning to a normal life, not wanting to let terrorists deprive them of it, while also trying to raise awareness about the hostages' situation.
Andererseits versucht man natürlich, auf die Situation der Geiseln aufmerksam zu machen. Am Ende des Schabbat, also am Samstag.
Every Saturday evening, thousands of people gather in Tel Aviv at the end of Shabbat to call on politicians to take action. They demonstrate in various ways, some peacefully, others more forcefully. Last year's demonstrations were deliberately apolitical, with participants stating that they did not want to take sides. However, something has changed. It is not just about bringing the hostages back now. For many, it is also about condemning their own government, which they believe has failed them. An open war has been raging for more than 160 days, and yet military efforts have only managed to free a handful of hostages. too many remain trapped in the hands of Hamas.
Präsident Netanyahu, den man
The demands from those angered by Prime Minister Netanyahu, often labeled a crime minister, can be summarized by a call for his resignation. Suddenly, people stormed off, occupying a highway. The Israeli police crack down on the demonstrators, pushing back those who are so desperate because they believe the government is not doing enough to free the hostages.
Man hat die Menschen zurückgedrängt.
Some label the government protesters as politically left-wing. And while it's true that there are some very left-wing groups and party supporters among them, the majority of those I spoke to are more likely to be from the political center. They are often simply people who believe that this war, the way that it is being waged, is not helping society. They argue that the war brings suffering to everyone, but does not free the hostages.
Wähler der Mitte. Das sind einfach nur Menschen, die sagen, dieser Krieg, so wie er geführt wird, der bringt uns nicht weiter. Der bringt Leid über alle und die Geiseln bekommt er nicht frei.
In Tel Aviv, I encountered a turmoil of emotions, with anger threatening to dominate.
In Jerusalem war die Stimmung anders.
In Jerusalem, the mood seemed different, just as it was at the beginning of the war. More relaxed than in Tel Aviv. This is partly because the many religious believers of different faiths in Jerusalem are not so easily intimidated, as they trust in divine protection. Additionally, Jerusalem has not been the main target of the thousands of deadly rockets fired into Israeli territory.
Auch nicht das Ziel der tausenden Raketen, die auf israelisches Territorium abgefeuert wurden.
Occasionally, a rocket heads towards Jerusalem. And of course, there are attacks of various kinds in and around the city. Sometimes beatings, other times stabbings, or even shootings.
Manchmal Prügelattacken, dann aber sind es wieder Messerstechereien oder sogar Schießereien.
Yet, despite this, there is a certain normality in Jerusalem, aside from the near absence of tourists.
Da sind
You can't even feel the tensions during Ramadan.
sogar bisher am Ramadan.
The city is decorated with signs wishing the numerous Muslim residents a joyful Ramadan.
Bürgern einen frohen Ramadan wünscht.
There are also few identity checks in the old city of Jerusalem only, for example at the Damascus Gate or the Lions Gate. The Israeli police explicitly avoids conflict with Muslim worshippers. I visited the old city several times, spending long hours observing the behavior of both the Muslim population and the Israeli police, and nothing major happened.
Eine Art Blase. Jerusalem ist ein eigener Mikrokosmos.
Jerusalem is a microcosm of its own, seemingly undisturbed by the escalating events nearby. However, demonstrations are increasingly taking place in Jerusalem as well. For example, large sections of the ultra-Orthodox community are demanding continued exemption from military service.
Sich zum Militärdienst verpflichten lassen möchte.
This contradicts the wishes of large sections of Israeli society who believe that all societal groups, not just their own children, must serve and risk their lives.
ולהילחם על עתיד ילדיהן, ואנחנו התעוררנו, ואנחנו נלחמות, עשרות אלפי אימהות שמובילות בגאווה.
Obwohl Israel nach außen eine gewisse Stabilität ausstrahlt, könnte der Kontrast zwischen den innerisraelischen
And although Israel projects a certain stability to the outside world, the contrast between different groups within Israel couldn't be more striking.
לסחוב את הנטל הזה הוא כבד, שתעזרו לנו באתגרים הביטחוניים שלנו.
Nur wenige Kilometer vom Gazastreifen entfernt, also im südlichen Israel, liegt die Kleinstadt.
Just a few kilometers from the Gaza Strip, in southern Israel, lies the small town of Sderot. The last time I visited, it was a ghost town, with residents evacuated. You could hear artillery fire and the battles raging in Gaza. You could even smell the war.
Jetzt allerdings kommt das Leben langsam wieder nach Sderot zurück. Man sieht Familien.
Now, however, life is slowly returning to Sderot. Families with children and older people have returned. They all try to reclaim the lives they led before the Hamas invasion.
In Sderot selbst gibt es einen ganz unscheinbaren Ort, der aber in meinen Augen symbolisch die
There is an inconspicuous place that, in my eyes, symbolically illustrates the differences between the liberal Western mindset and Islamist ideology.
Auf einem Spielplatz befindet sich dort eine Art Raupe. Das ist dann so ein
There is a caterpillar-shaped structure on a playground in Sderot. And although it looks like a tunnel, painted to invite children to play, the concrete caterpillar actually serves a completely different purpose. It is a missile shelter.
Während palästinensische Terroristen Milliardengelder dafür ausgeben.
In Gaza, large sums of money are spent on building new killing facilities to wage wars. Gaza's powerful leaders have no regard even for their own civil population. If civilians are killed during the war, this aligns with the openly declared plan of Hamas leaders who use dead children for propaganda, to isolate Israel in the media and to reverse the perpetrator-victim narrative.
Man sieht ganz stark einfach den Unterschied zwischen der israelischen Kultur und
Israel, on the other hand, invests large sums of money into building rocket shelters wherever there is a risk of danger, accessible to all inhabitants.
Initiieren, Kriege zu starten, diese Tunnel in den Boden zu bohren.
In Israel, the clear aim is to protect life, whether of Jews, Muslims, or Christians. In Gaza, Hamas pursues an ideology of death against its enemies and against its own civil population.
Bei der Hamas in Gaza verfolgt. Wir sind gerade auf dem Weg zur sogenannten gefährlichsten Grenze der Welt.
I am currently on my way to what is often called the most dangerous border in the world, the border between Israel and Lebanon. Southern Lebanon is controlled by the terrorist militia Hezbollah, another proxy of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which aims to wipe out the Jewish state.
Raketenbeschuss auf Israel, es könnte auch jeden Moment zu einer Infiltration wie am 7. Oktober kommen.
Massive rocket fire is launched daily at Israel from the border region. And many residents fear infiltration of towns and villages, as happened in southern Israel on October 7th.
Ich war knapp 2 Kilometer vom Libanon entfernt, als ich im drusischen Dorf.
The small village of Horfesh, which I visited, is about 2 kilometers from the border with Lebanon. I spoke to local residents there. The Jews of Galilee, although a group that has separated from Islam, are firmly on the side of the Jewish state. The inhabitants serve in the army and most of them are proud patriots. They repeatedly told me that the rockets Hezbollah fires at Israel threaten them just as much as they threaten Jews and other inhabitants of Israel.
Die bedrohen sie doch alle. Die Bedrohungslage ist so groß.
The level of danger is so severe that some communities and towns, such as Kiryat Shmona, have become ghost towns months ago. The residents have been evacuated and are unable to return. The mood in this region is tenser than I have ever encountered anywhere else. Of course, people have heard about what happened in the south on October 7th. And naturally, the inhabitants in the north now fear a similar massacre.
Ein derartiges Massaker an der eigenen Bevölkerung. Das heißt, viele der Zivilisten sind bewaffnet.
As a result, many civilians are armed and most are reluctant to speak on camera. Whenever I turned on my camera in the village itself, local security forces approached me, allowing me to proceed only because of my press credentials. The predominant concern is that the other side might be spying on military posts in the area.
Dass ich nicht dem Feind zuarbeite, dass ich nicht beispielsweise von einem Ausguck aus militärische Stellungen ausspioniere. Die Stimmung im Norden ist wahnsinnig.
The fear of attacks is palpable. People in northern Israel are genuinely fearful for their lives. Many places have been completely evacuated, while in others, such as Hofesh or Tzfat, where many ultra-Orthodox Jews live, daily life continues but is overshadowed by rocket attacks, the absence of tourists, and the looming fear of a new and large-scale war.
Wenn die Weltgemeinschaft sich nicht auf den Iran fokussiert.
If the international community does not soon focus its attention on Iran, if it only keeps its eyes on the Gaza Strip and fails to pressure the Ayatollahs, then Iran will continue to foment war, not just in the region surrounding Israel, but also in places like Iraq, Yemen, and many others. It is high time the global community addresses the Islamic Republic of Iran to prevent a major conflict.
Es wird sonst zu einer Eskalation.
The Jewish state cannot, of course, accept that its citizens, whether they are Jews, Druze, Christians, Bedouin, or Baha'i, must live in fear and terror. The Jewish state cannot accept that they either lose their lives or homes because the United Nations fails to enforce the binding United Nations Resolution 1701, which requires Hezbollah to withdraw from the border. The United Nations troops on the ground, stationed between Israel and Lebanon, appear incapable of disarming the terrorist militia that holds de facto power in Lebanon. They lack the heavy weaponry, sufficient soldiers, and a robust mandate to enforce peace. Those who are not paying attention to northern Israel now may be shocked if one day this small nation takes military action against Hezbollah. Sadly, many media outlets will likely only send their camera crews and reporters once Israel begins to defend itself against the terror that has been ongoing for months.